We're at 251 Deer Park Road, April 2nd, 2007. This is Mark Brady, and we're going to talk with Grandpa today, Vincent James Serritella. And my wife, Rose Marie, is going to help me with this, and my son, Mark. Grandpa,
yes.
I want you to tell me what you remember growing up in East Harlem.
Well, we used to be a clique in there, and we used to pass our time in the Harlem House, which was a settlement house, and we had a lot of fun playing pool and poker and then I joined the baseball team in the boys club and the settlement house there, and we used to play baseball on weekends because the rest of the week we were going to school, unless it was the summertime when schools were closed. And we used to go to different places. We used to go to Jersey, explore, and one time I went with my friend. We used to call him Eddie the Horse, and he had a bicycle and I had a bicycle, and we decided to take a trip to Stamford, Connecticut, and to see where he used to live before he moved to East Harlem. And so when we went up there, he showed me the area. I said, was it worth going up there with what you show me here? I said, this is where I lived and I was happy. All right, and then we let her go, and then we decided to come home. And
how many miles away was it?
Oh, I would say about a good 20 miles. Good 20 miles.
Now, where were you born? I think I heard this.
106th Street. And then we, as we got older, we were getting to learn the language of East Harlem, and then we moved to 16th Street.
Would that be 116th Street?
Yes, it was, but at the beginning, I didn't understand what 116th Street meant until I got myself educated. So we grew up, and then
I guess one of the big events was the Mount Carmel, the feast
there every year, and it was a happy time. We all enjoyed it and listened to music, the parade, and then as we got older, we went into the service first around 1941. Some went 41, some went in 42. I was one of them.
But before you got into that, you had your brother and your sister.
Oh, yes. My family consisted of my mother, Rosa, as we called her, and my sister Antoinette, and my brother Johnny, which they hung a name on him because of his sports playing, his basketball and baseball, and they called him Kid Form because of the form that he had. The same thing with bowling, and he had that form. Only he had that form. So he was known for that. And
what did Grandma do to pass her time?
Grandma do? My mother? Mm-hmm. No, she was in the bakery managing the place, and she loved it more than going out and having a good time.
What kind of bakery was it?
Italian bakery, bread and biscuits, and
who did the baking?
My uncle, and he had a baker, which was it was an old time baker, made good bread. His name was Philippe, and
what kind of ovens?
it was a brick oven. It was a nice size oven, about 250 loaves of bread each time they filled it, and then I used to run away from the bakery because I couldn't stand it. So as I got older, We all went into the service. Then we came home.
How many years were you in the service?
Oh, 3 years and 2 months.
But your mother's name was?
Rosa.
Okay. And your father's name?
Sebastian.
And he passed away when you were younger?
When I was 7 years old, he was only 36 years old.
What did he do for a living?
He was a great tailor, and he made a coat for Mrs. Caruso, Enrico Caruso's wife. And when we came out of the service, we were kind of, we didn't want to work or do anything. We just wanted to have a good time for a while until we got bored of that. And, well, about 6 months later, we went bowling, and we went to 86th Street. And the place was crowded, so we couldn't go there. So we decided to look for another bowling alley, and we went to the one on 85th Street, which was a small one, where there was only 4 lanes. And when we went up there, we saw this group of girls with one fellow among them. And we started getting acquainted. First, I was the one that initiated it. And I started saying, "How are you?" and everything
To the girls? To all the
girls. And then I concentrated on one particular person. It stood out. She was blonde, with big eyes, and what the color? Green. She had beautiful green eyes. And I started to having a conversation with her, and I asked her, "Do you never bowled before?" She says, "No." Says, "Do you want me to give you a couple of pointers?"
Well, what made her go bowling that night?
Because she was supposed to go dancing with the girls at a place where there's a community dance, and somehow they were closed because of a strike of the waiters and the cooks. So there was no dancing, so they decided to go for the first time to a bowling alley, and they found the same place like we did.
What was the name?
Now, what year would this be? Do you remember?
Oh, I would give you the exact date. It was September the 20th, 1946. I'll never forget that date. And
after the war.
Oh, of course.
Okay.
I never had a steady girl, so I got acquainted with her, and then I asked her for her telephone number when we were about to depart, and she gave me her telephone number, and I said, "I will call you in the week." And somehow I called her up, and I dated with her, and I've been dating with her until I married her 2 years later. And
In 1948?
48 of July 3rd, 1948. And what else did I?
What do you remember about the wedding? What do you remember about the wedding?
No, we didn't have a wedding. I didn't have the money at the time. So we figured, let's get married. And I was kind of a private person myself, and I didn't care about weddings.
How many years were you married?
Huh?
How many years were you married?
Oh, well, then no, let me tell you about, we went to live in the Bronx on the Grand Concourse near the end. Near Mashula Parkway. That was the end of the Grand Concourse. We lived there for 8 years, and then we decided to move to the country, which was Long Island, and we called it the country because that was, to us it was country, because we lived in the concrete world. And we moved into Westbury, in a nice home, and we lived there, and we grew up a family. No, first we grew up a family in the Bronx, and when I decided after we had the complete family, we would move to a better place, which was Long Island.
And you opened up your own bakery.
No, then after when I got married, before you were born, I made the hard choice of saying that I wanted to become a baker, which I detested. And I learned it in 2 years, all by myself, just watching. Nobody taught me.
Who were you watching?
I was watching the old baker. And I watched every day, and one day I decided to bake some bread. And me and my brother-in-law, on a holiday when there was no bread to be made, so we decided to go down and make bread. Well, it wasn't the best bread in the world, but it was a start. And from there
your brother-in-law, who was your brother-in-law?
Morris Tartaglione.
Okay.
And that's where I started to improve myself as a baker, and it took about another 2 years before I became great at it. And I worked for, I would say, about 32 years of baking bread. And then I retired at 65, and we lived there in Westbury for about 48 years. Mm-hmm. And then my wife was very sick with some sickness that she had, and it took about 4 or 5 years, and then she passed away. And then I moved in with my daughter and my wonderful son-in-law. Yes. and his family, great grandchildren, and I've been happy ever since. And that, I think that covers all my life. And I thank God it happened this way.
Okay. Let me take you back when you were growing up in Harlem before you met Mary, mm-hmm. and you went into the service. Mm-hmm. And what year did you go into the service?
The latter part of 42.
And where did they send you?
Well, first I stood in the States. I was with this mechanized cavalry, and we learned to drive every vehicle they had. It used to be a horse battalion, but they had a few horses when I first in, and I used to wonder, every day that passed, I seen fewer horses. And we were eating meat every day. And I was wondering what happened to the horses. And we used to joke about it. But I don't think it was because we ate horse meat. But it felt that way.
And where was that camp? Where was the first place you went?
That was Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, which was a wonderful camp. It was like a campus. It was a regular barracks. Permanent barracks, and we stood there for about 6 months until they organized the WACS, which is the Women's Army Corps, whatever they call it, and they came to take over Oglethorpe, and we were kicked out of it. So we went to a camp that I just forget the name in Tennessee.
But that the first camp you were at, was that Furman College?
No. That came later. I moved to Tennessee. Tennessee. From Tennessee, then it was about a year later, we went to Massachusetts at Fort Devon. We stood there. So my 3 friends and I decided to take a test to go into the Air Force. So we took a test, short test, about 100 questions. And three of us passed, and we left our outfit, and once one of my friends stood with the outfit, the old outfit. And we went down to Florida. We went to Miami Beach, and we lived in those hotels that they took over because the civilians couldn't live in there. So they used to use the Miami Beach as a base. And we stood there until we took tests to see if we could get into the cadet school. So three of us went on there, and two of us passed. My friend Benny, who came from Massachusetts, Lexington, Massachusetts, and the other one who came where the fishermen's are.
Gloucester?
No,
New Bedford?
New Bedford. He was one of those that lived there, and he didn't pass, so he stood in the Air Force as a non-com. So we went to. So my friend Benny, because he had an alphabet that was first, and he left first to go to college. He went to Texas A&M, and I went later on because I had the S, which was an alphabet way back, and I had to wait about 2 months later to go to South Carolina in Greenville at Furman University, and there's where I would stay there and get prep education to brush me off. So when I go, the plans were that I would go after the 6 months to 9 months of training, like pre-flight, flight, and advanced flight, and become a pilot, a bombardier, or a navigator as an officer. But somehow the course, whatever it was, stopped short because they stopped the program with these people that came out of the ground forces to go into the Air Force. So they said, we don't need you anymore, because they were getting fresh blood from civilian life. And so they decided to send us back after the four and a half months of waste of training. And so we went back to the ground forces.
So when did you go to Europe?
Well, then, about 3 months later, we went to Europe. We went to England.
You went on a troop ship?
On a cruise ship to England, and then we took a train from the east part, the west part, to the east part, and take another ship over the channel. And we went to Omaha Beach, which is maybe about 2 months after the invasion. And we started traveling through France, and we ended up in a small town called Nancy, which is a beautiful town. And we settled there, and we started delivering supplies to different areas of France, to Marseille and to other places, near the Rhine River. And then after about 44, and about 6 months later, it was around Christmas, we were in the Bulge, and the Germans were making a last push through the Bulge. And somehow, around Christmas time, it was a lot of fog, that's why they were sneaking through. Then when the fog lifted, as they were going through, Patton and his tanks and the bombers coming over stopped the invasion of the port, Antwerp, to get the fuel and the supplies that they needed very badly. And they stopped them, and that's how they defeated them. The war was over. And we went into Germany, and we stood there waiting to go home. So I was in Marseille waiting for my turn to go home, but others were going home before me because they were in the service longer, so I had to wait. And, as I was waiting, I went to the Riviera and spent 2 weeks there. And
Hold on one second. Mark, do you have a question? No? Mark? Okay.
And,
All right, so the Riviera.
And I stood there for 2 weeks, staying at those old-fashioned hotels right off the beach. And we had a wonderful time there. And then when I came back, and then my number was up, and I came home by boat. And I came home, and I was happy to come home.
What do you remember when you got home? You came into New York City?
Yes, I came to New York City. I landed at the port there, in the west side. The port there, I don't know which port it was. Then they said we got to the station and we came home. I took the train. I knew how to get home from there. They released us there on the east side, so I took the subway train coming home, and that was one of the happiest days of my life, and the war was over. So my life was great. Yeah. I had no regrets.
And I remember you used to tell me when you were younger, you used to go to Times Square for New Year's Eve.
Oh yes, we used to go there, and we went there New Year's Eve, and we had a good time. A bunch of us, about 8 of us, used to go at night, and then we stood there until 1 o'clock, and we came home one particular New Year's Eve. That was the last one, and we decided to go back in the morning to go to the Paramount Theater and see a movie and a stage show. And we went home, we washed up, we freshened up, and then we all got together about 7 o'clock in the morning, and then we went to Times Square, and we went to see a movie, and then we saw a great show, a stage show, and that was a lot of fun. And then we went.
And that was that Dinah Shore?
Dinah Shore, yeah, she was singing. We had a particular guy in our group that used to have a beautiful whistle like a bird, and every time she used to sing, he would whistle, and she would stop, and then she started singing again, and he would whistle, and she stopped and says, "Come on, fellas, give me a break. I had a tough time last night." And so we all clapped, and we let her sing. Yeah, that was a wonderful time.
Yeah, so you saw shows on in Times Square, and you went to the.
I saw all the bands I could see in those days. There was about 50 bands. I seen most of them, maybe 35 different bands at this Paramount Theater, especially mostly there. Of course, there was the Strand, there was the Capitol Theater, and there was the Roxy, and there was the music, the music. What's it? The Radio City Music Hall.
And what were some of the bands that you liked best?
Oh, my favorite bands was Benny Goodman, Tommy Dorsey, Artie Shore, what's his name? Woody Herman, Glenn Gray, and Jimmy Dorsey, and Harry James, and Gene Krupa, all those bands, and I could name others, but offhand I can't remember. But it was a wonderful time in those days. And
then you used to go to the boxing matches at the Madison Square Garden?
Yeah, I went to the old one at the Madison Square Garden, the one at the old garden. I forgot what they called it. It was a smoky place. And then one in Long Island City, which is the Queens. And we had wonderful times. We have good memories.
And then you used to play stickball up in East Harlem?
Stickball in Harlem, that was the game. All the neighborhood, all the different blocks had their own teams. We used to play teams from different blocks, and not for money, more for to see who's a better team. Competition to see, not for gambling, but we to see who's better in playing stickball. It was a game played without gloves, just with a broomstick and a Spalding. And then I started playing baseball, and I used to go on an island called Randall's. And that was right off the Triborough Bridge. It's just, you could walk it over the bridge just a little ways and just go down the steps and go on to Randall's Island. And then we played every weekend. We could play. Sometimes we forget to go home, and we'd come home at night when it got dark. And that was a wonderful thing. I enjoyed it.
So you're after your father passed away, your mother raised the kids
Yes.
by herself.
It was a tough life. She used to do everything. Matter of fact, she didn't get much money from the welfare. They used to call it welfare because my father was a veteran of World War I, and so we got a big amount of $80 a month for rent, for everything. And so she had to work on the side to knit, to make some extra money so we could live a little more comfortable. Because with $80, I don't think we could have existed with just $80. So she had to work at night, go to sleep about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and work up early in the morning and send us to school. So she had a tough life, and I admired her for that.
And I guess the country was coming out of the Depression at that time, so things weren't so good.
Not when we were alone. That was before the war.
But after the Depression?
After the war was the Depression. The war was starting to come out of it. It took a little while. So my mother was already with my grandmother in the bakery. So we were better off after she went back with my grandmother. At the time, they weren't talking to each other. Now they got together, and then she went to work in the as manager of the bakery, and she took care of us, and we didn't miss a thing after that.
What was your grandmother's name?
Sandra. They used to call her Cinderella. She had a candy store, and everybody knew her.
And what about your grandfather? What was his name?
Oh, Vincent Serritella, same name as mine, and he was an architect. He used to make plans and mostly concentrate on churches, built churches in Italy and New York. I know of one church that he built, which was located on 110th Street, which they used to call it 110th Street, between 1st and 2nd Avenue. And I used to see that church, and I used to admire it. And it was a wonderful thing. And he built some buildings, too, downtown and around 9th Street. That was a busy area. That was commercial area. He built commercial buildings. He used to plan them and build them. But not him, but he used to be the boss.
Now, did he come over from Italy?
Oh, yes. He was educated in Italy at the college there. Then he came and he went to Columbia College here.
Do you know when he came over from Italy?
It could have been about maybe 1910, 1912, somewhere around there. Because my father was born in Italy, but he came here as a child. And he went to school here.
Okay. Did your grandmother come from Italy?
Yes, she did. She came here, I would say, around 1912. 1912, same time, because my grandfather's wife, which was my grandmother, died in Italy. So he came to America to marry another woman, which was my step-grandmother, Serritella. And that's how we got my Uncle Phil, which was my father's half brother.
So when he came to America, did he know he knew he was
No,
going to?
it was a friend of his that got them together. Say, come over here. I got a nice woman, like a mashad, that they call it, the message. We call it a mashad. Get them together and introduce each other, so they would get to know each other and get married.
Okay.
And that's how my father came over, because my grandfather came here to marry his stepmother. My father's
And did they live in Harlem also, East Harlem?
Yes. Oh, yes. No. Yeah, in East Harlem, but not 160, 106th Street. 106th Street.
Okay. Then they moved uptown, huh?
They stood there until my grandmother had a business, until my grandfather died. And then she came up on 116th Street. And that's where she settled down. She had a little shanty, and then she got a little store, candy store, like a little shanty. And she made out. She was there for many years. She was there for, I would say, good 30 years. Maybe.
And then you had your brother Johnny and your sister Antoinette.
Well, she was always home, but one time she went right before the war. She took a trip with my aunt to go to Italy. My mother sent her to Italy. She stood there for about 2 months. Then the war broke out, and they had a little confusion about coming home. And my sister came home, but because she was a minor, so they had somebody over there to be on the boat with her. She had to find someone that was going to New York and that she knew. My aunt had to stay there because she was not a citizen yet. She was married, but she didn't become a citizen. So it was a little red tape there. She had to wait. So she came later. And my brother went into the service about almost a year and a half after me. But he went into the infantry, which is, it was the brunt of the army. The ones that do all the fighting, most of the fighting. They were on the front line. So he went. He wasn't there too long, and then he went to the front lines, and he got wounded.
And this was in Europe also?
Yeah, it was in, to be exact, it was in Italy. He got hit with a shell between the legs, and he couldn't walk for a year. And they took him back to the United States, and he was in the hospital in where's the casino? In New Jersey.
Atlantic City?
Atlantic City. And he was there for about five months until he was able to walk a little bit. Then they sent him home. But before that, he met Joe DiMaggio there. He was convalescing there too. And some other people that I just don't know the name, but they were famous.
And now Antoinette passed away several years ago, your sister?
Let's see, she was 79. I think she passed away in 97.
Okay.
97.
Yeah. And then you saw the old Yankees play several times up in Yankee Stadium,
yes.
Going back to Babe Ruth.
Oh, yes. I saw Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Tony Lazzari, Frank Frissetti, the old time of the Italians I'm talking about now.
That's the Bronx Bombers.
And the Scooter, Phil Rizzuto. And I saw Mickey Mantle, I think, once or twice. And Who else did I see?
Yogi Berra.
Yogi Berra I saw, yes. Yogi Berra. Bill Dickey, the catcher before him. And one time I went to the ball game right after the war when the kids were young, when my son was young. He was about 5 years old. And we went to see the Yankees with my brother. He had the tickets. And we sat behind the plate above on the second balcony. And we were watching ball games from the back. And we were having a lot of fun there. And then Bobby Richardson hit a foul ball, and it was coming toward me. My brother says, "Jimmy, it's coming to you." And I said, "I'm ready for it." And I caught it with my two bare hands, and I gave it to my son, and he was so happy to receive the ball. And we watched the doubleheader too, and that was a lot of fun too. And
Okay.
yeah.